It was 236, then it went to 250. Now, 336. Like, I'm like, I thought like, good. How you doing, man?
Are you guarding this box back here?
No, I'm guarding my food. If you want the box, you can take it. However you get it out, that's on you. Somebody asks me, I'll be like, I don't know. I'm that kind of guy. Today I'm that guy. I don't know where the box went to. Y'all getting sworn in, not me.
You're not part of it?
I'm not getting sworn in.
Why am I getting sworn in then?
Oh, me too?
Yep, not to swallow.
You have to leave your burger.
Oh man, no one said that.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Councilman Kent Lee, City of San Diego. I have the honor of helping to swear in the board for 2025 for the Mira Mesa Town Council. And so we'll just go right into it. And that you have been duly elected under the bylaws of the Mira Mesa Town Council to your respective positions on the Mira Mesa Town Council Board of Directors. I ask you to repeat the short oath of office after me. If you'll raise your right hand. I, if you'll state your name one at a time, just so that everyone.
Gary Goss. Annie Stevens.
Eric Holbeck.
Imani Roach.
And then repeat after me. Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly
swear.
That I will faithfully support.
that I will faithfully support
The bylaws of the Mira Mesa Town Council.
Bylaws of the Mira Mesa Town Council.
And will help as I can.
and will help us
To make our community a better place.
to make our community a better place.
To live and to work.
To live and to work.
That's it.
Continue to testify tonight to an update on the status of District 6, as well as some issues from the city. The floor is the council members who will be taking questions afterward.
Sure. I have some notes for me in mind, just because there's probably some updates and items that we'll have questions about and have some questions afterwards. But if you haven't met me, my name is Kent Lee. I have the honor of serving as a council member for the 6th District from the city of San Diego. That covers not just Mira Mesa, but all the way from the University City, all the way out through a portion of Swiss Ranch, from Serena Valley down to Mira Mesa and the Conway area. A very unique and large district, about 160, just shy of 160,000 residents. And I've been in office now for 2 years, since November 2022. Just as everyone might be aware, I am a Mira Mesa resident myself, so I live a couple blocks away from here. Been in Mira Mesa for the last 19 years now, I'm losing count. And have a 5 and a 7-year-old. They keep getting older. They were 2 and 4 weeks. And so so if I leave before the meeting is over tonight, it's because tomorrow, as any parent in here might know, is the first day of school. I don't know why. City Unified took today off. I should let someone know about that. But tomorrow's the first day back to school for a lot of families in City Unified. So just as an update, maybe starting back this last year, folks, if you were at town council meetings before, you might be aware, on the city council, I had the opportunity to serve as the chair of our budget committee this last year, which we were hoping was going to be a bad budget, but the last of a series of bad budgets. That is not the case. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But in last year's budget cycle, we were able to accomplish quite a bit, even in terms of ensuring that funding was delivered on a couple of key projects in Mira Mesa, in the community in general, trying to keep a couple of programs, whether it was in libraries or some of our parks, sustained in what was a difficult budget year last year. I also had a chance to chair the Land Use and Housing Committee. A lot of our focus, and you'll see this moving forward because I'm going to continue chairing our Land Use and Housing Committee, has really been on thinking about how we address the housing crisis in San Diego beyond some of the loudest conversations, which I think the community and every community in San Diego recognizes. We spend a lot of time talking about density or no density within communities, whether folks want to see building or not. The reality is we are in a pretty severe housing crisis. San Diego is still one of the most expensive places to live. And what we have been focused on as a committee is finding ways to address that by looking not just at the big picture items, but really looking at housing policy, some of the bureaucratic rules that we have on what can or cannot be built. Some of the surprising things are home builders face in San Diego. For example, the fact that permitting in the city of San Diego, not just for homes, but for businesses, can sometimes extend a year or 2 years. Makes it extremely difficult for anyone who's actually looking to get anything done within the city. So that is a lot of what we have looked to address this last 2 years. I had the opportunity at the start of this year to be elected by my peers to serve as the council president pro tem for this next cycle. So we have a council president. I think as the UT called it, the ceremonial second in can in case our council president's not available. But in that case, we are working pretty heavily on issues around the budget, on housing and homelessness, and again on land use, specifically because I'm going to continue chairing our land use committee. For our council as a whole, if you've been reading within the media at all, the city is facing a pretty severe budget crisis. It's not just the city. I think we're hearing that at every level of government at this point. Almost every level of government, from the federal government is always in debt, but from the state on down, had significant amounts of funding from COVID-19 during the pandemic that helped to bolster local funding. And in those years, we were actually doing fairly fine, but what it did unfortunately do was that it masked the reality that most local governments were running a structural budget deficit. And that is exactly what we're facing heading into this next year. The last bit of funding that the city had during the COVID era is going to be completely exhausted. We are staring at I think Shane and I were just talking, the number keeps shifting, but in our last 5-year outlook, a roughly $260 million deficit in the city of San Diego. You probably remember that on the ballot in November was Measure E, which was a potential sales tax increase for the city of San Diego. Depending on your opinion, it unfortunately failed with only 49.7% approval. But what that really means is that the city's going to be facing a pretty severe budget shortfall this year moving forward. The mayor and the administration already announced in December a number of efforts to try to initially begin dealing with that, everything from a freeze on hiring to just other measures that we can look at in terms of reducing expenditures and spending. But there's a pretty harsh reality that we have right now that the city's only going to be able to meet its budget by making pretty significant cuts in the next year. So we're waiting to see what's going to get proposed in this year's budget. But there's probably not going to be a surprise that a lot of what we expect to see that's put forward for cuts in previous years for the budget when we face a shortfall are things like libraries and parks and programming that we care about within communities. You'll see that a lot of what we fought for in the last budget cycle, even with the deficit that we faced then, was trying to ensure that the cuts that were being implemented were actually strategic and thoughtful. Even when it's $250 million, that's in a $5 billion city budget, of which only about $2 billion is truly our general fund. But that means that there is still room to think about what's actually important for our communities and to make sure that the priorities that we have get maintained. The good news in Mira Mesa is that some of the major progress that we've seen in the last couple of years was not reliant on the city's general fund. So a lot of the funding that we see for some of our park updates, the big one right now being the Mira Mesa Community Park, For our phase 2 updates, the new aquatic center, all wheels park, etc., that's almost all funded by our local development impact fees that were collected within this community. And before the rules change, stayed within the community. And so that is not changing. That project's moving forward, still on a timeline for fall 2026. We have a couple other park projects that have taken forever. I think a couple folks in this room will know. Wagenheim finally opened at the end of this last year, despite a lot of pushback from Park and Rec over whether fields were ready. But I know a lot of our sports teams, AYSO and others, have really appreciated having those fields back. Salt Cave Park is unfortunately still in the same progress point that it has been for a little bit. We'll provide, I guess, further updates for that, as that might help. A lot of it has been a mix of disputes that the city has with several of its contractors at the moment, which is one of the major hang-ups, and then some subcontracting work that we're trying to get moving forward. Another major project that we've been extremely frustrated with, I think the mayor's office would know, she walked by earlier, so I don't want to remember for this, but every single month since I've been here, I've mentioned that it would have benefited the city to finish repaving of Gold Coast and Parkdale, which has been a two-year, 2-month project at this point. When people ask about it, the most important thing I think you should help to tell folks is that I think they look at the road and they think, well, nothing's being done about it. The reality is, Gold Coast and Parkdale, that project started in November, December of 2022, and it's still ongoing. Parkdale, I think, is anticipated to start paving, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. That timeline has shifted, depending on utilities. Any day, I know. We don't let us share a date.
Signs saying road work ahead are up
We
already.
don't want to share a date because I think today was the first anticipated date, and then it came and went. And so when it starts, we'll tell until it starts. I'm still crossing my fingers. It's mainly Parkdale that's the first piece, and even that was a bit of a fight. I would really want to applaud the mayor's office and our engineering and capital projects team, because Parkdale and Gold Coast, as some of you might know driving it, they're actually 2 separate segments of street, and they're separated by a section of Gold Coast that's actually fine. And so we wanted people to start on Parkdale, even though Gold Coast wasn't ready yet. And because it's the same contractor, part of the trouble has been getting them to split that project to be willing to do that. So Parkdale is going to begin soon. The reason why Gold Coast still is delayed is largely because of utilities. And so as we continue to work on the street, what we find is that there are utility lines underneath that need to be relocated. I think the most significant ones at this point are SDG that we're waiting on. But the moment that is completed, then Gold Coast will also be done. And the reason why we don't see work on it is because right now you've watched all the sidewalks, the storm drains, the culverts, all the additional work on the outside of the street should get done. And the very last piece is the actual tearing up and repaving of the street itself. So I'm sure we'll all celebrate, but just we decided to leave when that's completed. That is still underway. The last update I think I have is more of a county one, but it's our understanding that the county anticipates breaking ground on the epicenter project this month as well for January. So that's what they've let us know, or at least what we know. So we're waiting on specifics for that, but that is the now $10 million investment that our county is making for our future teen center. I think those are some of the major updates. I do want to thank a lot of folks for help, especially the town council for some of the holiday events that we had. We helped to distribute hundreds of turkeys to families during the Thanksgiving holiday. We also held our annual Trees for Troops event, which really supports both veteran families as well as military and active duty families, and that had over 150 participants this year as well. So thanks to the Mira Mesa Town Council for helping out with both of those events. Some volunteers. Will be really sad to no longer see Danielle around, but I understand that she's probably pretty happy where she is, and closer to family as well. So I think those are the last major updates that I've got, but maybe we'll open up to questions. And then I know there are probably plenty of other things going on. So start with
One, what is a longer term problem that, as Joe and I asked every time we come here,
chunks of that that will be completed. Three Roots is responsible for completing their portion of it. Stone Creek eventually will be responsible for theirs. I don't know how the eastern side is going to get done still. Yeah, oh, okay. But I mean, like, given the apartments that are still there and whatnot. But on the very western side, in order for New Santa Fe to be completed all the way through the 805, is a big section that is currently the city's responsibility. I think funding is a big question at the moment. So when it was last studied, the project was estimated probably in the $60 million range plus. I think we've been learning from a city standpoint that every project that we've had estimated in the last couple of years, the actual costs have ballooned significantly above that. We saw that with the Mira Mesa Community Park Phase 2 project. That estimate they thought was hopefully above what they could see it and being too low. So we don't have, I honestly do not have an immediate answer to that at the moment. In the sense that the city itself, if I were to be honest, is not the way to do the project by itself. We've been talking to a couple of potential developers who are working on projects within the area, whether they would have the ability to pay for the next phase of work, design being the next big piece of it. So even if we're not paying for $60 million, these are just to find the $10 million or so, I'm just throwing a number out, to actually do the design work of the project. So that's what I think we're aiming to fund. But right now, we know this next year's budget cycle with the deficit that we're facing, there are capital projects that the city has that I would not be surprised if one of the proposals would be that we pause any capital project that is not already closer towards the construction phase until at least we're out of the current budget.
It may be 15 years before we actually get housing in Stone Creek. There's time where we need to find some way to tie that project to Stone Creek and make sure it gets done before it.
Yeah. That's what I think what we're still committed to working on. That's why we've got that at the top of our priority list, capital projects here. Because it's one of those long-term projects that we will never get done in our time here. If we don't start it, then we're not going to get to see it get done. That's our certainty.
What's our population now?
But Mira Mesa itself,
Yeah.
I don't have an exact number for Mira Mesa.
It's very
Yeah, it's still about 70 something thousand.
So that'd be approximately. And they want us to get to 144,000?
So so this, thank you for asking this question because this applies towards every plan update to the city. I actually really hate it when media reports this because I chair a land use committee, and so I do this every single time. So when we pass a plan update to the community, Mira Mesa as an example, University City is another one because I have it within the district. They were saying that we were looking to double University City's population. In order for that to happen, even within Mira Mesa, every single parcel of property that is upzoned from what currently is built would basically have to be torn down and rebuilt at the highest residential density for that to happen. So in Mira Mesa, most of that density, in order for us to get 140,000 plus, would require that almost every basically every shopping plaza within Mira Mesa Boulevard would have to be redeveloped to its full residential capacity, which I think we've had a lot of discussions about. This is the challenge the city has. We're trying to plan for the next 30 to 50 years, and so we throw an estimate out, which is saying, okay, if we change the density to this level, it'll allow for this amount of building. But how much of that actually is going to happen and in what time frame? That's the real question. So Mira Mesa I look at because that plan update passed in 2020, so now 5 years ago. It has no residential on it currently at all in the Mira Mesa Convoy region if you try to pass there ever. Little opposition to any residential within that area because there are no residents in it. Tons of opportunity. But it turns out that the city has drawn up plans, allowed for a ton of it, and yet to this day we're still looking at the first couple hundred units 5 years in to maybe be done this year, if not maybe next year. And there are whole chunks of it that are just either not feasible or property owners don't have the interest of actually completing the project.
You can't even support the population now. The traffic is unreal. And then when the power outage happens, it's a zoo.
Oh yeah, I would say that if that's what it was today, that you might have to pass it as a severe outage. I think I right now probably more potential outages in the next year or two. The reality for us in San Diego is most of San Diego is completely built out. So we have a 1.4 million population within the city. We don't have a ton of extra property to develop. The city, for now, is going to continue growing. The projection that we had, the latest projection for the next 50 years in San Diego is actually pretty bleak. It suggests that the population in San Diego is likely to decline by 2050 and beyond. That is not actually a positive thing at all, if you want to think about it, because the biggest question you should ask is, if the population is going to decline, where is the decline happening? And likely that means younger folks, families that are trying to figure out how they're going to make it work with kids going to school and working families. Those are the folks who are most likely to move. So there's, no matter what, the reality that we're going to need more housing. I would say, and I would argue that the city's plans typically focus on having more housing in areas that give a higher chance over the next decade, several decades, to provide more transportation and transit opportunities. For now, that's largely along, for example, here in Mira Mesa Boulevard, is where you see most of the single-family home areas around Mira Mesa where I touch. That's why I don't think Mira Mesa neighbors often enough to see every other day someone saying, you know, can I find a single room? Don't care if it's a backyard, a preview, whatever you can find, because that's literally all people can afford to live in at the moment. So that's the balance that I think we're struggling with, is trying to provide capacity for growth. But even then, it's been 2 years now. I think the plan update in Mira Mesa had a lawsuit, so that was why we didn't see anything for the first 2 years. But I would be shocked in the current environment for building if we see any major development in Mira Mesa in the next 2 to 5 years still, unless something changes in terms of some of the math. But other than customer beautification and slot space,
Right, but
we
if
have not
not,
really seen
people
much.
leave, why can't we make housing affordable? It's ridiculous, everything's $1 million, people can't afford $1 million house. I mean,
We underbuilt in the city for the last couple of decades by a massive amount, and so it's just sort of math at the moment. So San Diego's not changed in terms of how popular of a place it is to live, but it's become much more expensive to do so, and that's because our housing stock is, for the most part, not changed. When you look at the state's housing goals for the city, and we're doing okay, but over the next, I think now it's 6 remaining years, we're targeting 110,000 units of housing within the entire city of San Diego. And even with a record year last year, we built 10. We have to triple our production for the remaining 6 years just to hit the goal. That's how far we are. So that's why when people ask, like, why are we allowing folks to build more? It's because we don't have enough. And
Ken, real quick, you said 110,000 units in the next, what, 6 years?
say again?
110,000 units in the next 6 years?
One of the state's RETA goals were 108,000 or so over an 8-year period, of which in the first 2 years we hit. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head.
So 180 in the next 6 years, or 110 in the
It's
next
probably like 90 now in the next 6 years.
90,000?
On Mira Mesa Boulevard, there's the big health, big building for the health companies there.
Yeah.
Are part of those apartments are gonna be on top or on the bottom?
The ones on Pacific Heights.
On the Serrano Valley
Yeah,
side.
on both sides.
Yeah.
So are there apartments for those employees?
Yeah, so if you look at our community plan, the way it was built out previous to the update, those areas were only zoned for commercial or industrial use. For the most part, that's all of Serrano Valley. That has changed in our latest plan update to allow for more residential development, but most of those properties were planned. I mean, the one right on Pacific Heights and Mira Mesa Boulevard, that you saw a decade ago, I want to say, a long time ago. And they were approved for it and yet didn't build it until the last year and a half, it seems like.
Well, doesn't it make sense that if you have houses, that you have workplaces? So you're saying that all of our shopping centers, to tear those down, and then to build apartments on top, and then have the businesses on the bottom.
That is a potential.
So that makes sense. However, it doesn't make sense to me, Camino Santa Fe by Miramar Road, and then the one up here by Best Buy, all that huge apartment building. I don't see workplaces for those people to work. If we don't want to clog the freeways and the boulevard, why don't we
us here, it's really by employment centers. And so in this area, Serena Valley, University City are probably considered the two largest employment centers, not just within the region, but arguably within the entire county. It's two of the largest employment centers, and so that's why the surrounding communities next to it, if you had more housing, whether it's along Camino Santa Fe or even along Mira Mesa Boulevard, the expectation wouldn't be that they weren't necessarily right where they are, but it might be folks who are working down the street. I think this is also why when I remember a decade ago when the city approved the One Paseo project in Carmel Valley, for example, a lot of the traffic impacts were considered from Carmel Valley to Serena Valley because I think we just knew that the housing people there liking that the folks were coming down and working in the Serena Valley area. So it's why the Coaster, North County Transit District, for example, this year, they took over the Coaster connection from MTS, and we fought and tried to work with them to reinstate that program. And it's a program that allows coaster riders bus transit to employment centers in Serena Valley and MMTC. And that's because we understand as people don't necessarily work here, they might be traveling down from Oceanside, Coral Pass, Long Beach.
Yeah,
Work here, and we want to make sure they have options.
another problem, I agree with her, is the quality of life. You want to just put people here, is that it? Or do we want to have a community where we have a good quality of life? And what I'm talking about is the wildlife and our habitat. So as we built here, we have taken our wild animals, like our coyotes, and forced them out of their habitat, destroying some of the plant vegetation, and you're just cementing it over. So we're creating like the Orange County, LA corridor of cement. That's not good quality of life. When I went down to Camino Santa Fe, there are no trees, no bushes there. Also, that big one there by Best Buy, there are no trees and no bushes. We need green plants to provide the oxygen, and we need them to take in all the carbon dioxide. That's our cycle, and that creates a quality of life. So I would like to see emphasis on quality of life for us. And we want to try to stay smog-free, and we're doing a good job that way, but we're not creating a community. We're just creating cement. And I just think that's the wrong direction.
So I don't disagree with you, but that's probably exactly why the city has moved in the direction that you've seen over the, I wouldn't even just say recent years, but over the last decade or so. Again, San Diego is a place that's mostly built out. Our only options, if we want to add more people and account for population growth, have typically been either we build up or we build further out. Building further out within our region typically means building further away from city centers, usually in more open space and more wildlife disturbance. In doing that. And so if we don't want to continue building out into open spaces and canyons and other areas, that's, I think, why you see a big shift when we've been trying to accommodate for population growth to do it within the footprint that we currently have. It's also because we really do believe that there's, with that greater footprint, there is a possibility that the city will allow for greater use of transit and other transportation options when there are the people to actually have it make sense. So, I mean, that's always been our mantra when we come to office. I think folks who know us know that we've been a significant advocate for more housing, but we also understand that that only works if you actually add with it the infrastructure that's needed within the community. If you add to it the park updates and the facilities, whether it's libraries, parks, or other spaces that we need, ensuring that communities have everything that they need to function. And all of that, unfortunately, has to try to happen at the same time, which is probably our biggest challenge these days, between limited budgets and all the different agencies that are in charge of planning in San Diego. So I will tell you, San Diego, for example, even just this last year, received a federal grant for tree planting, for example, about $10 million to try to plant more trees in urban spaces in particular. We believe that as we're redesigning streets for the future, that they should be more walkable with more sidewalks and tree canopy, but that typically means also having to match that with people within the area. And so this is the balance I think we're always trying to struggle with. And I would just note, quality of life is great until people can no longer afford to live in San Diego, then then I would ask, like, who are we looking to serve at the end of the day? So yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky that I get to live here at the moment, but that's only because I bought a home in 2010. Otherwise, I could not afford the home that I live in today. Most of us would, right? And that is the certain reality.
With
Yeah.
that, and then we're going to continue with the background. Okay, so then with that, okay.
Going to New York, they're putting a fee on congested areas. Are we going to do that here in Mira Mesa? Can we do that in congested
Every article I read about it suggests that it's not popular and the governor only redid it after the election was over in November. Which is not the reason why I would or wouldn't. I think in New York, I think for folks who travel to South Manhattan, the congestion is probably very famous. So I've heard in articles that LA or San Francisco are considering the same kind of policy for specific areas that they have. Let's be honest, like San Diego, we have traffic issues, but it's, having grown up in LA, it's nothing like traffic in LA. My mother drives 20 miles from work, which is the same distance I drive every day. That takes me 25 minutes to get home. It takes her 90 to 120 in Los Angeles. So I know having grown up there, how drastically different it is here. So I think for us, a lot of it is trying to plan to really think differently. I mean, people ask all the time, why are we expanding the freeways or the various roads that we've got in terms of size? And the reality is, every study has typically shown that when you add lanes to a freeway, guess what? We just fill them up with more people, and you hit the same congestion level. It just the load matches what the reality is. So we're fortunate not to be in the same scenario, but it is really tough. I mean, I drove east on Mira Mesa today during the power outage, and you weren't moving for half of the race.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. Yes.
And I hope I'm wrong, but I thought that we paving was continuing on pipelines and water meters and that kind of stuff. And then the pure water going from the Miramar to the lake over there. So if that's not, I'm divided, if that's not going to be happening.
Not tied to the same project.
Miramar Road.
Yeah.
Miramar Road is where the pipeline.
That's where the pipeline is going to go from Skate Mall to Greenvilla and come up in 115. And part of what was negotiated was that they were going to repave from Eastgate to Greenville Road rather than just patch over where they dug up.
Yeah, if you think Gold Coast is bad, I would argue Miramar's, for the traffic flow in Miramar, it's really, really bad. And it's because of pure water on that stretch of street. But yeah,
Holding back for
Gold Coast is being,
supposed to be that was
Gold Coast has been delayed.
rebuilt.
Yes. Yeah. So Gold Coast is going to be completely reconstructed from the ground up, but it requires that utilities that are underground at the moment be relocated to do that. So that's moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah. It really is happening. It's just I refuse to put a date on it now because it's supposed to be done a year ago. Yes.
You touched on this briefly before. I'm curious what the public transit, what would it take to get more public transit in Mira Mesa? It sounds like it's more density first and then the city future.
It's frankly more funding, period. I think right now, most of our public transit is going through MTS. And I think even in this last budget cycle, I mean, everyone's challenged in the same ways, but my understanding was that they made certain choices they had to cut back on some route expansions and focus on some capital needs. That's frustrating, but a lot of it is on the MTS side. Some of it is multi-agency. I mean, it's not just the idea of adding additional lines in Mira Mesa. Obviously, in the plan update, the gondola was actually in the plan update. It was one idea. It was one idea. And this is mainly because people ask all the time, like, why don't we extend the trolley from UTC out across Mira Mesa? There's just no way to do it without acquiring a significant amount of land or going completely overhead. And so that's why the gondola idea came up, because it's actually more feasible cost-wise than a trolley extension. But still sounds realistic expansion we're seeing on the public transit side that we could have part of from a district standpoint is an extension of the trolley from the border all the way up through Sorrento Valley, potentially Purple Valley, which is the purple line for the trolley. But even that, for example, supposed to run up and down Congo Street, would almost certainly have to run underground.
But my work is on the border.
Yes, and it would go all the way from the border up through here, but on the eastern side.
That's the first line that's built, very successful, was from the border to downtown, where your buses were crowded with people, and they were actually filling up to where buses couldn't handle it. And that first trolley line, blue line, was that first one Senator Mills brought the money in. It was wildly successful.
Yeah, the blue line from the border all the way right now to UTC is now the highest transit ridership of MTS that we have. So to answer your question, it's a mix. So we need, people always ask, and they say, well, we shouldn't build more housing until we actually have more public transportation. But the reality right now is that some more public transportation doesn't have the frequency that it needs, but the times or locations that it needs, and that's simply because there aren't enough people to use it. And so there's this always chicken and egg problem where, well, we need more people in order to actually utilize the transit. We also need more transit to argue for a lot more people. We've just been an arguer that both should happen at the same time, and we should be pushing for both. And sometimes one's going to get ahead of the other, but that's also why it's going to push the other to possibly happen. We only have one major bus in Mira Mesa at the moment. That is a challenge. We'd love to add more, but we also have to be able to justify it. And I mean, right now it's not actually easy to get to that line unless you live right off the Race Boulevard, which most people do. So that we recognize, and we'll need to change. So.
I think I have a solution to your budget problem. Let's try something new this year. Instead of shutting the libraries in Park and Rec, let's take everybody in the administration of the city of San Diego making over $100,000 a year, take a 10% pay decrease to fund the budget shortfall. And take it out of the people that really don't need it. All these people need these libraries and recreation. People down at the city that making all that money, you know, let's hurt them once and see how it goes. Then we won't have these problems in the future.
You can work with the officious people, get rid of them.
So, Joe, thanks for mentioning this. I will tell you, when you see anything about the budget in the next 6 months, because it's going to be extremely challenging. I'm not jealous of the mayor's office answering the questions for any of this. But the reality is we're all having to deal with it. And as much as I'd like to say the city's budget is funding programs and services, libraries are a great example. Libraries only exist because of people. There's no cutting library budget without cutting people. And so that is not an objective that we all have. I mean, I can tell you, in my position, I'm sure the mayor feels the same, we're not looking to shorthand folks that we have throughout the city. This is largely because for the last 10 years, the city has run on significant vacancies for a number of positions. Libraries are a great example. Most of them are paid minimum wage. They're still barely paid above minimum wage. As it currently stands, it's been very hard to fill those positions where you can go down the street and make more working for fast food, healthcare, anything else at the moment. And so those people are very important to us. We have fought pretty hard for library and park budgets in recent years. But I also know that when the time comes, we're going to be asking questions of what do we want to actually see cuts to. So we're looking at proposals. I'm sure at the moment the administration's asked every department for the most part to make proposals for up to 20% of a cut. But again, most of that, if it comes to reality, is people. And so I think for us, it's trying to figure out how do we be strategic in that. A library here in Mira Mesa or a library in City Heights might get used very differently, I would argue, than a library in, I hate to pick on communities, but let's just say Carmel Valley, since I've been them once or twice. And so we want to make sure that whatever impacts that we have are thoughtful in how we can actually minimize the damage in neighborhoods that maybe need services more. Mira Mesa is an example where we have one single library serving the largest residential neighborhood in the community. And so if we were just to cut that in a similar fashion as other communities, I would argue the impact would be pretty disproportionate. And so that's what we wouldn't want to see, but at the same time, until we've got numbers in front of us, it's going to be hard to see what.
Yeah, just to bounce off of that last topic with the libraries, The Pacific Highlands Ranch Library that just opened, multi-million-dollar, very nice. I don't know if anyone's been to it, but I drove past it yesterday and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And this new community gets a completely new library, which is fine because there's more residents there. We get a carpet job in our library. We have 3 routes going in, and there's our new community there. Shouldn't we get more resources because of that?
We do, and so I think that is a great point. I don't remember with Pacific Highlands Ranch their library, but if I remember correctly, and you can correct me, I think their library was actually paid for by the developer so it was an agreement that they made with the developer to pay for that. Yeah. Which we don't have that kind of development to pay for what we have here. 3 routes didn't come for free, for example, so the development impact fees that went into 3 routes are the exact reason why we are building a brand new aquatic center and skate park and all the updates that we're making to the community park. Almost all those, a very, very large portion of those funds came through the development impact fees from 3 routes and customer review. I mean, this is an example where if those projects, if we weren't adding that housing into the community, we wouldn't be able to make those updates because that's what's paying for it. And then on top of that, 3 routes is giving the city a 10-acre parcel for a brand new community park.
23,
I'm sorry. 23-acre community park site, which folks want to fight over where to put a new community rec center in 30 years.
Yeah,
That's been a discussion, but
they are not giving that, we're paying for that. Unfortunately, this contract
a constant vicious cycle. So I think there's a mix of things that we need. We do need more housing. And I don't just say housing in general, but we actually do need more housing that's focused specifically on addressing needs of folks who are facing homelessness or even at the bottom rung of income levels. I think for the first time last month, the county's numbers of people entering homelessness was actually less than the people, coming out of homelessness was less than people entering. For well over 2 years, that number was in the flip opposite. So I would argue that we could build a shelter every day tomorrow, and it would just fill up because we have thousands and thousands of people who are homeless at the moment. And so we could build 3,000 beds tomorrow. It'd fill up the shelters immediately, and we still have people on the street, and the number will continue to compound. So there are a couple things that I think we need to do, but again, this is reliant on funding, it's reliant on partnership with different entities. We find that diversion is really helpful. Prevention is pretty significant as well. We could be spending thousands of dollars every month just to house someone, whether it's in housing or shelter. That same money put in someone's pocket often can make a difference between them actually making it out and finding housing on their own. Most people who leave our homelessness system, by the way, don't find housing through our outreach or our own systems. A lot of them actually find housing on their own, for good or for bad. They're not relying on government help to make that happen. So it really requires a lot. The city's done everything from trying to help people reconnect with their families. I think that's something that's become more and more of a statewide focus as well. But even in Mira Mesa, I've been shocked sometimes when you hear a story and someone who's homeless is in their mid-20s. They graduated from Mira Mesa High School. Their family literally lives here, within the community. And it's not that they don't want them. They literally can't figure out how to keep them, how to address some of the challenges that they're facing. And we also have a behavioral health system, not just here, but around the country, that is not sustainable to meet the needs. So this is the influx of all the challenges we've got. I think our challenge is trying to figure out how to strategically address it. Sometimes it starts with one